Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Room 42. I'm Liz Fraley from Single Sourcing Solutions. I'm your moderator. This is Janice Summers from TC Camp. She's our interviewer, and welcome to Dr. Casey McArdle, today's guest in Room 42. Dr. McArdle is the Associate Chair for Undergraduate Studies in the Department of Writing, Rhetoric, and American Cultures at Michigan State University. He directs the undergraduate program in Experience Architecture, Professional and Public Writing, and the minor in Writing. His research is centered around user experience, instructional design, technical communication, rhetoric and writing, accessibility, project management, and online writing instruction. His latest publications include Finding a Teaching Ally, Designing Accessibility-Centered Pedagogy, appearing in IEEE Transactions on Professional Communication, which he co-authored with Kate Sonka and Dr. Liza Potts. His book, Personal, Accessible, Responsible, and Strategic, Resources for and Strategies for Online Writing Instructors, which he co-authored with Dr. Jesse Borgman, won the 2020 Computers and Composition Distinguished Book Award. That book was followed by their edited collection, PARS in Practice, More Resources and Strategies for Online Writing Instructors. These texts were inspired by the website he co-founded with Dr. Borgman, the online writing instruction community at owicommunity.org, which was created in 2015 as an open resource for contingent faculty struggling to find support for teaching writing online. Today, Casey is here to help us start answering the question, how do accessible technologies impact teaching methods and practice? Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We are thrilled to be talking to you again. It's always a delight. So one of the things, so this is interesting because this is teaching teachers how to teach in a way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the main goals, was to sort of develop something that would also, initially the idea was for students on some level with a particular class, but on other levels, we wanted to engage faculty, potential faculty on the line to what this would look like to take with them at other institutions or even K through 12. That was really sort of the goals when we started to think about some of these conversations.
Right, right. So that they're integrating these behaviors and these practices into whatever their subject is?
Yes, without a doubt. So if we start in the basics with regard to developing certain accessible documents and curriculum and what it means to sort of create spaces that will engage students across all levels, then we can really sort of apply that to different disciplines across campus and across any area of education.
Right. Now, it's interesting, if this came out, the book was published in 2020.
The book came out in 2019. We developed
2019, yeah.
Yeah, we developed the website in 2015. We were hanging out and we were presenting at conferences, and we realized there was some disconnect with regard to some of the best practices that were happening for online writing instruction. And so Jesse and I were like, well, why don't we just do it?
Right.
So we went and we made it. We just made a website. Like, I can make a website. It takes me 2 seconds. I can do a piece of cake.
Right.
So we started to build up what the website could hold in terms of references for other types of texts and articles and books, workshops, conferences, those types of things. And then we started to realize that we sort of had our own approach from reading all the different types of texts that people could come up with. And so that's where personal, accessible, responsive, strategic sort of came into play. And we said, not only is this perfect for OWI, but we started to realize that when we published the book, because there's personal, accessible, responsive, strategic for teaching and instruction, but also for administration. And that was one of the key things of how to work with faculty. So you can develop a particular PARS approach to administrative style to help faculty who might be struggling to figure out how to connect with students in an online environment. And we've realized that it was not only helpful with concern for, teaching online, but also face-to-face. The lessons that we learn from our ones and zeros inform our face-to-face interactions. We've been saying that for a really long time. Every innovation that we make, should inform both spaces. And this is something that, we're hoping the past 2 years have brought some insight into lots of these inaccessible moments and spaces with regard to education and a number of areas beyond education, that we don't just assume that once this sort of ends, if it ends, that we're done, that the lessons that we've learned we take with us, and that we reimagine and we think now at the beginning of every conversation about accessibility.
Right. And so it's interesting you talk about things that translate from zeros and ones into our personal interaction. It's really interesting to think about. Right. Because, because so many things are swimming in my head right now. I mean, it's interesting. The timing of your book was was pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. Who knew?
Who knew?
Who knew, right?
When we initially we had a publisher a year or two earlier, and they were going to publish it for like about $100 each for each book. And Jess and I were like, well, that's no one's going to buy that. That's not going to help anything. And our main audience is contingent faculty.
Right.
Will not be able to afford $100.
They don't have deep pockets.
No, because we are contingent faculty.
Right.
We can't pay for our own book.
Right.
My budget.
Buy my own book.
My book.
So we had an honest conversation with them, and they let us out of our contract. And then we went over to WAC Clearinghouse and Open Resource, and we're like, hey, we got this idea. And Mike was like, love it, let's do it. And part of that was like, all right, here's the book, and then we have an idea for an edited collection that will put PARS in practice, and hence the edited collection that came out afterwards. So it was a great one too, and it worked out really well. So yeah, in terms of timing, yes, it did. We did a lot of workshops and conversations and talks and events all throughout summer of 20, large universities to small colleges to organizations, helping them reimagine what online instruction could look like.
Right.
And all of those places invited people outside of just the writing discipline. So there are people from the social sciences there. There are people from businesses all over there, because you can take PARS and you can apply it to all those different spaces.
That's what I was going to say. It doesn't matter the discipline that you're teaching. That doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're teaching humans.
Yes, that's the whole point of every single interaction that we talk about. That's the first word is personal. Remind them that you are a human being, that this just hasn't been posted and you'll see the students in 6 weeks when you grade everything. No, that's not the goal.
Right. Yeah. There's kind of interesting, which is one of the things I really wanted to talk with you about, because the practices of accessibility, this is something that you model in your behavior, right?
Yeah, everything that we do, I believe as teachers and educators, we're not just teaching content on some level, we're also modeling particular behaviors beyond that. And so when I have conversations with students, or if they say, hey, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z, I should be able to provide an environment for them to be able to do that, or at least generate that conversation, so that once they are advocating for themselves, because they should be doing that anyway, after they graduate, they can have that conversation with their colleagues or peers or employers and say, look, in order for me to do this, I would need X, Y, and Z. When you give me this, we'll all be successful. And so it's ensuring that I put into practice the very things I publish on.
Right. Yeah, because I also like the fact that you point out that the student needs to advocate for themselves. And that's part of creating an accessible environment, right? You're teaching teachers to have an accessible environment so that they can be responsive and receptive to a student advocating for themselves. It's a two-way, it's a reciprocal street, right? It goes both ways. Like, I need to have an environment where a student can come to me, and I need to have a conversation, and how to set those things up, right?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think this is the key thing where Jesse and I, we talk about, being strategic and how we scaffold assignments and how we structure everything. I'm OCD in that I plan my entire semester out from day one. Like, you come in, I want a student to be able to see that schedule so they can plan their life accordingly as well, because they might be doing a number of things as well. But I've also built into that schedule, it's extremely agile and malleable. So if we're having pain points and issues, we can pivot and do other things without a doubt. And so I think that's the key thing, is that when we saw everything happening, when people started to transition to online, they took these rigid structures that they built for face-to-face and just said, well, I'll just stay with it and nothing will change no matter what, rather than understanding that everything is changing.
Right. That you bring up a really interesting point, because I know I was talking with a lot of teachers and professors, and some of them really had a hard time pivoting to online. Now, for me, I couldn't understand that so much, because I've lived in a world where it's online or face-to-face. I've had to have that agility for the last, over a decade, right? I mean, I was using voice over IP before it was really, a thing. But it was really interesting to watch and to observe how. So is this program, or is this, how do you adapt when you're one of those who has a very rigid framework? Because I think that's one of the key things you bring up is that rigid framework has to change.
Part of it, what we sort of learned, and this stems from this past fall, where I developed a HyFlex model for teaching, where for that class, and I'm also doing it again this semester. For that class in fall, that I'll speak about, because there were 30 students in there.
Yeah.
So we had issues with concern for spacing. We want to make sure we're doing social distancing. There's seniors. I want to make sure they're prepped for market. Many of them are going to graduate and go into a professional space where they might be working remotely to start.
Right. They might have a hybrid situation.
Correct. So they might be interacting with part of their team members who are face-to-face in the office while they're remote, or they might be in the office and part of their team might be remote.
Right.
And so we wanted to build in what that could look like. And so it worked on a number of levels. It also gave students options. As I told them, if you are not feeling well, you will Teams into class. Like, let's establish that now. Like, if you're not feeling good at any level, regardless if we're in a pandemic or not, if you're not feeling good, please don't come. So 6 students per week were assigned to work remotely, and the other 24 worked from the office, our classroom. And it rotated. And we averaged about maybe 8 per week that ended up being remote. So the 6 normal, and about 2 that couldn't make it, some commuted, some didn't feel well, and that was totally fine. The option was there for them, and I wanted that to be present. I also wanted to set up a particular schedule so that they knew that they had to come to the office, the classroom, but could feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm not feeling good, or hey, I have a commute, or the weather's bad, we're in Michigan. Is it okay if I work remotely? And I'm like, yes, of course. So I think that really worked well. Now, what I found over the course of the semester is that having conversations with MSU Information Technologies, and then Scott Chopre and Caitlin Kirby, some other people conducting research for the EdLEAG cause, education, literacy and technologies that they're working at MSU, was that faculty, because there were a couple of times where the microphones didn't work in the overhead and the cameras didn't work. I couldn't get Teams to work. And so I had my laptop that I would carry around. It wasn't ideal, but the microphone worked out okay. The camera worked out okay. I run everything through Google Docs and our slides. So students are in groups constantly. Each group gets a slide and they're writing on each slide to inform one another. And so we have a daily record then of the entire class there for everyone to see. So even if the audio is bad or the video is bad, they can still see the conversation we're having either in the chat or in the documents. Everything is there. And so I think what we found is that those who, really, really struggled from that transition, and this was sort of echoed before, was that lack of confidence, or on many levels, perhaps the overconfidence of that if I just plug in my face-to-face curriculum, it'll be fine, without realizing it is a lot of work to get students to engage. A lot of things break down, a lot of things don't work, and you have to be confident enough in the system that you've built, because if it is accessible from the ground up, it's accessible for students. It also has to be accessible for you to deploy to students so that they can engage. If you've done that, you're good. If you haven't done that, you are scrambling, you are freaking out, you become your own information technology support, which is not an easy task. No. And so that was, I think, the biggest thing was the confidence. I know that I always tell the story that one of the first times I taught online was a summer well over a decade ago, taught a long time ago. And I remember my classes, I had a lot of international students and we were using Google.
Yeah.
More than half of my students resided in a country that did not give them access to Google.
Right.
And I can't ask them to download a VPN to circumvent the laws of their nation to access course content.
Right.
So I pivoted and moved everything to Eli Review and our CMS, our Desire to Learn. So that way it was accessible for everyone to look. So it was really important for me to see that type of failure for me to happen. So the next time when I taught my face-to-face class, guess what I was doing? I wasn't using Google anymore. I was using all these other things specific to that. So that was a better way of me understanding that I could learn from an experience, and that would inform it. Those who transitioned from face-to-face online had none of those experiences to fall back on. And they had articles and workshops and talks to help as best they could, but some of that personal experience and failure, and that it's understanding that it is okay to fail, and for students to see you fail so they can understand how you deal with failure, and then how you can iterate to, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it does, you're still finding solutions for it. I think that was the biggest problem, I think, that we saw lots of faculty happen. Confidence, lack of failure, lack of appreciation for it, those types of things.
Well, failure is a really good teacher.
Without a doubt. When my daughter gets frustrated all the time, I'm like, this is good. We're both frustrated.
Yeah.
This is sixth grade math. It's stumpy. I don't understand it either. We're both freaking out about fractions. Let's solve it together. Let's go over it. I don't know why they're not teaching you decimal points. But it's okay. We'll have a good conversation about it. But it's failure's fine because that's how we learn.
Well, you work through, right? When you have failure, when you have challenges, that's why those are oftentimes the best teachers, because we remember them the most.
And you develop learning paths that you can then build on your own that you take with you.
Right.
When I teach the intro to web authoring class, we're talking basic HTML and CSS. It's, if you've never had any of that coding experience at all, it's a brutal class for lots of students who have never taken it before. And so I tell them by week 10 or 11, you'll be really freaking out because you will have learned just enough to realize you don't know enough.
Right.
And then week 13, without fail, it clicks. And then some of them might get frustrated with some of my feedback, but it's helping them establish a particular line of reasoning and understanding so they can develop their own resources to find their own answers. And so I help them. We have a list of resources for them to all find, and then they pick the ones that work for them, that speak to them, because some are just, code dumps and others are actually like walkthroughs of how to use it. This might work for some, this might work for others. So having them figure that out, because failure is crucial.
Yeah, and I think that frustration part too, like if you're trying to learn how to do accessibility, how to be a teacher who has incorporated accessibility, you have to be confident in failing, right? You have to be confident in stumbling and in feeling frustrated, like embrace the frustration, right?
I think part of that also is a great conversation to have about embracing feedback and what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a hard lesson to learn.
It's extremely difficult for some.
It is very hard.
And having worked with faculty in the past, when you say, hey, listen, here are some templates that you can use to make your documents more accessible for your students, and they take it personally. And I'm like, this is not about you. You can still use these different types of fonts. This is just a template. This is why we use headers. This is why we use all those things to help students and screen readers navigate these spaces. And like, well, I don't think I've done anything wrong. Students have never said, it's not about you.
But see, that's a big thing though. I think that's a really big thing, is getting over it's not about you.
Yeah.
Even as an individual, who you might know this, and then you're receiving criticism from somebody and then you forget it's not about me. Yeah. Right? Boy, how do we get around that? Right?
Someone's not going to tell you, here's some ideas if they don't care about you.
Yeah.
Right. If they don't care about you, they're not going to tell you. Right. They'll give you feedback in order to help you get better because they care too.
We care about the program. We care about students. We care about you. If you are successful, our students are successful, the program is successful. It all works together. All the boats rise. And so I hope, maybe not, I've gotten better at having those conversations, of saying, look,
that's hard too.
This would be really good if we tried it this way, because then maybe, more of your students might be able to engage with the content. And this is when it talks about the design and the course management systems and the 50 different clicks to get to different content, and trying to advocate for faculty of simplifying so that it doesn't need to be all those clicks, and you can set it right there and it's easy for them to manage, and it doesn't have to be a 20-page long syllabus. It can be a conversation with students. And so
and I just wonder, it's an interesting thing. Do we ever try to imagine ourselves in the receiver's role when we're designing things?
This is what Jesse and I have talked about a lot. I've had lots of CMS, course management systems companies, come and talk to me over years. And I had one that came and spoke to me back when I was in grad school at Ball State. And they sat me down. I was the nerdy techie guy, grad student. I was like, go talk to Casey. He'll give you some feedback on what you guys are doing. And I was like, listen, I don't really want to have this conversation because you're not going to listen to me. So I go, no, we promise, because I'd given them feedback before. So I sat with them for an hour. I'm in the middle of like dissertating. And I was like, so every minute is precious.
Yeah.
I gave them an hour. And then they implemented none of those particular changes. But the biggest takeaway that I kept saying to them, which is what I sort of say now, when I talk with people is like, the faculty really aren't the primary users of this space. It's the students.
Yeah.
So you have to understand that you have to give us an opportunity with this very rigid structure you've given us to make an inviting space for students. Because if they can't find it, they will give up and they will do something else. Think about you when you're on your phone or you're doing something. If it's too many clicks and you can't find it, you're like, well, that is a poorly designed app. Done. Next. If they're looking for an assignment, if they're looking for a resource and they can't find it, they'll be like, well, it probably wasn't that important to begin with. So then why should I try?
Right. Or you'll end up with a lot of people pinging you personally to get the information.
Yep.
As they're tired and fatigued trying to find your stuff.
Yeah.
Buried somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the key things is making sure that we understand this gets to rhetoric, why it's so important, understanding who our audience is and the text that we are composing for those specific audiences. Yes.
Keeping things nice and simple, a lot of creating open space. I think that's the other thing too, is I am notorious for oversharing and putting too much information out there. So editing and minimalism is important for me. It's like my battle cry, because I know in my comfort zone, I'll write you an epic story. But nobody wants to go through that when they're trying to search for something. You know what I mean? Yeah.
The irony to so many of the things of that we do, I think, in writing is that I love to write my narratives, and I'll still do my text messages and I'll still do my emails. But if I can have a quick, 30 to 40 second conversation with someone over the phone, there's again, because rhetoric permeates everything we do, then they can hear my voice and they can understand on some level what I'm trying to communicate a little bit differently than how I would have to compose that email. So it's always fascinating to me about the different types of modes that we use to communicate, and a few seconds can shift a particular understanding.
Because they get the emotive value when we're speaking. There's a lot more senses are involved, even though we're on a Zoom call, we're not physically in presence. Still, more of our senses are involved in the communication when we're in this environment. That's why face-to-face is so powerful, right?
Yeah, this is why making everything personal is so powerful. The best that you can to then realize there's a human being on the other side of that email or that Zoom call or that conversation, to ensure that, so when we make things personal, we've got images of, share pictures of our dog, a 3-year-old Chihuahua that run around nonstop. That is my daughter's, who was in the back of most Zoom calls. A picture of ourselves or something that we care about, so that students can realize and make those types of connections. So there's a number of things built into the particular ways that we can communicate that remind us who we are and those connections that we have. And accessibility is really at the heart of all of that, because when we're doing that, we are being inviting. We're being much more inclusive.
That's what I was just going to say, because one of the phenomena that happened, too, people started realizing, when a lot of people are in a home environment and conferencing in, and they don't all have fancy studio settings, and nobody has like that private office in their home. Sometimes it's the corner of the kitchen table if you can get it.
Yes.
Right. And if you've got kids and pet life happens. But I think one of the things people realize is people, I think, create a different bond with each other because of that. Right. And I think it brings to that point that you just made. That's accessibility as well.
Without a doubt. And I think those are the types of connections that we all make with one another, that we sort of build on. And I was just having a good conversation with a colleague of mine who was talking about wanting to make more connections beyond our university.
Right.
Like, how did you do it? Like, well, there's a number of topics I'm passionate about that, don't necessarily reside at my institution.
Right.
I'm passionate about accessibility. I'm passionate about, program administration and what we do in project management, building mentorship and leadership, online writing instruction. So I've gone to all these conferences throughout the years. So I have many, many friends all over the country, and I love getting emails from them in conversations or seeing them at conferences and present to hear their ideas. We have that sort of, it's never a critique when we have those conversations or we're panels or presentations or conference. It's like, that's fascinating. I'd like to hear more of that. That's really cool, because I didn't think of that. And I'm glad I didn't, because you thought of it way better than I would have. And I'd love to know more.
Right. Right. But it's something really interesting. You said, so, in that situation, you might be passionate. Somebody might not be as passionate about a lot of things like you, but it's that translating what you're passionate about for those who aren't in that area.
Yes. Being an advocate. Yes, without a doubt. And I think that was what Kate and I, Sanka, when we created that AL 111 class, we're like, we're passionate about this. We know that people will be if they can actually start to understand what it is and how it impacts their lives.
Right.
So a 1 credit class, 5 weeks of theory and understanding and reading, 5 weeks of practice with regard to digital environments and spaces, and then maybe 5 weeks of, physical constructs and examinations. You're applying all those things, and they can start to make those connections from each week the way it was structured out with their own lives, not just their personal lives, but their professional lives as well.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing, is like, once you get people to sort of see a little bit of it, they go, oh, that does impact me on some level, then there's a shift of understanding and connection.
Yes, because that's, again, back to accessibility. That's inviting them in. It's like the Chihuahua in the background.
Yes, without a doubt.
You got to be that Chihuahua.
Yes. And I tell this to the students in my classes. I'm like, you guys are part of a large cohort. Look around this room, look around the Zoom room, make connections. You are all going to be advocates for one another. You'll be graduating together and working together.
Right.
More than just connections, you are unified, a loud voice championing usability, accessibility, and sustainability as loud as you can.
Yes, yes. And the more the merrier, the more the better, right? So
yes.
Louder voice. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Are you seeing this translate now that we're moving back into back into the in-person world? Are you seeing people who had a difficult time moving out of that world and into virtual, who adopted new practices? Are you seeing that? Because that can only improve the real experience too, to make the classes more participatory, the more accessible, more inviting to all of students. Are you seeing that translate back out now, or do you expect it to?
I hope it does. Have I seen it in practice yet? Kind of.
We're early. I get that.
We're early. Have I seen it at the level I would like? No.
No.
I'll give you an example, and this was a frustrating one, and I get it. I get this, but my daughter is over at grade school, and she was given a PDF. She was given a packet, and that packet was something that she didn't bring home. So we had to go back to her campus, to get that packet and come back. And I'm like, this was this past fall. I'm like, but wait a minute. Didn't we just learn how to put all of this online and accessible so we don't have to have that physical construct, that we can basically access that information whenever we need?
Right.
Was that not a larger conversation that the district had? Was that not something that took place at the school? Was that not reiterated? Was that, so there's a number of factors that could have gone into that particular choice. It's funny that I refer to a physical as a PDF. Now it's just one of those things, but it's one of those things where I was like, well, wait a minute, let's not just automatically say, so that just happened, and then go back. Let's say, so that happened. Now, let's take everything that we learned from that and put that into practice. So we are creating much more accessible spaces for our students to engage. And so for our peers and our colleagues, so people aren't left behind. So it's like, well, sorry, you can't come to campus today. Thanks for being a part of our department. No, we can Zoom out that meeting so everybody can attend. And I think that is one of the things where I really hope that we really take time to stop and look around at all the advancements that not necessarily have happened, but have been around, that we started to implement, that we can then sustain and make more iterative going forward, because we saw how important they were.
It was interesting. We were talking with another professor, and they were talking about they're back to a hybrid environment. And, it's a lot to try and manage the online chat and then the in-person conversation, and then remember your material that you're lecturing on. And I'm like, well, why don't you just have a TA in class? Like, somebody gets some brownie points.
One of the students rotated around.
Because Liz manages the chat for me all the time when I'm in room 42. That's why she's quiet a lot, because she manages the chat. Like, assign it to somebody so you can stay engaged and you're focused on your core competency, and somebody else gets a chance to, because that helps them whichever student
Yeah.
or whoever's helping you to stay engaged with what you're saying as well, because they're not going to
Well,
follow.
and if you're rotating among
Yeah.
the students, everyone gets to feel that they are participating and they are encouraged and they're invited and they're welcome. It's not just the favorite student or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to things, to what we have learned from this whole experience and teaching online.
Yeah, I had a ULA, an undergraduate learning assistant, in fall for like the last 10 weeks. She was a student that was paid by the Edley Fellowship, which is the education that Scott and them paid for. And she had taken the class in spring of 21. So it was my ULA for fall 20. So there was extra
nice.
level of insight into what our methods. And then I started to ask her, I was like, all right, so because I always do mid-semester debriefs. I'm like, all right, what extra questions can we ask? Because I implemented the suggestions you guys had last semester into that and then this semester. And so she started to develop questions for that. Then she started to develop extra readings and observations and things that could be contributed, which was great. And then we started to have, so when towards the end of the semester, when the weather kind of got really bad, more people were working online. So I maybe had like 10 or 12 sometimes that would be, zooming in. And so then she would handle and work with those who were in the remote groups. And then I would handle the face-to-face, and then we would rotate. And so it really gave a pretty good idea of support. And it made me realize that I was like, we can do this. And this is set in a way that I think not every room has to have all these amazing bells and whistles. You just have to have a strategy in place to make sure that you are engaging with students. And once you do that, it works.
I think that's the key thing. That's what your book is about. That's what that resource follow-up is about teaching people how to build strategies, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think that's one of the key things, especially with XA, our Experience Architecture program. We always talk about on some level being a strategy degree. We're developing products and processes as well, so help people work through them and navigate for other human beings. We did the design challenge the other day that I did with students. Some students were like, this doesn't seem like we're really designing something. I'm like, no, because they weren't necessarily producing mock-ups. I'm like, no, but you are being asked to develop what an ecologically friendly campus might look like. Now, how do you go about that? So let's talk about designing processes and research and who we're going to connect with and bring into that conversation. So yes, it's about developing strategy.
Which is design.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Designing, it's a design challenge. This is what I tell them all the time. They go, this doesn't seem like what. I'm like, trust me. Yeah. And at the end, they're like, oh, right. Yes. Good.
Well, but that's an interesting point, because aren't there things that oftentimes we just overlook? We don't say, it's just, we get into patterns in our life, I think, and we just overlook it. We don't think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we learn those patterns by watching whatever experience we were in, and like, oh, this is the appropriate pattern to do. But that isn't the only way to evaluate something. I mean, like, there are other patterns, there are other perspectives.
Yeah.
There's no one way to do anything.
And we see two extremes come from that, right? We see a pattern of convenience and like, all right, so I'm used to this. I'll just keep doing it. All good. And then the other end, which is like, there's got to be something different. We've got to have a better way. We've got to try something else. And so we're always going to ask students to do that, because otherwise, if you do it the same way, you're inviting in a small amount of people that have the same conversation over and over again. So
That's right.
Think differently about it to bring in new conversations. That's what accessibility tells us to do.
Right. You can't be participatory or accessible if you were doing the same old thing with the same old people every time.
Correct.
Yeah, that's one of Liz's biggest things, is bringing strangers, bringing people you don't know to collaborate with, people that don't know you, you don't know them, right? They're going to have different perspectives and create an environment where, they can feel free to share, and it comes back to
constructing that environment where they feel comfortable to share, because they're strangers. You're a stranger to them too. But I think I'm seeing that there are some of those strategies that you are addressing in the book and the research that you're doing, because every semester you've got a whole new bunch of strangers, and you're a stranger to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And you can't always do things that you did the same way last semester.
No chance.
So this is part of that, building that arsenal of being more accessible, right? Or creating accessibility. Because you can't rely on what you did. You have to look at each semester as a new learning opportunity for you to improve your strategy.
Totally.
Because it comes right back down to that strategy word you talked about.
I have a folder for each semester that contains my classes. And then in that folder has all like the activities and Google Slides and docs and everything and modules. And in that is the notes folder, is the notes document. In that are the notes that I make, like, this is what you have to change for next time. And I've got links to the particular slides or links to the module and notes on it, because I can't change it right there in the middle of the semester because students are going to be like, wait a minute, that changed. So I have to make notes because I have to be consistent. So I make those notes so that we can do the next iteration. We can always improve. Like I told you a little bit earlier about the design challenge. In, next semester, we're going to do one to start. We're going to do one mid-semester, and then we're going to do one at the end. Because we need to sort of, because I just now realized that that's a better approach.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the projects that I was talking to you about earlier, it's a brand new one. We haven't done it before. So I was really clear with everyone. We're just going to do the best we can. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to shift and change as we go. Feedback is important, right? Because, nothing is really set in stone, and you have to have that agility to be able to pivot and change. When you need to, because you do, I do get the point. You have to have consistency in this semester.
Oh yeah.
And then you learn for next semester.
Right. And in that, it doesn't say it in the notes, but in that is the out loud thing that I've said to the students. Oh, I need to change that for next semester. Next semester, I'm going to try this, so that they know that it's okay to make change and it's okay to have those iterations. I think this gets back to one of those key elements of letting students know that it's okay to fail and learning how to process feedback. I am processing the feedback of that moment, that we need to spend a little bit more time having conversations about what some of these design challenges look like and how they incorporate all of these classes that they have taken in the curriculum together in 30 minutes. It's like, that's on me to find a better job of doing that, because what I just saw tells me I'm not doing a very good job of that. So I can try that again next time. So the consistency is there, but also with the reminder of them that this can change and we are agile and we will move and we're malleable.
That's a difficult concept.
Yeah.
Right. Because one of the things teachers are up against is like, I have to make it identical every time. But that means that you're not improving. It means you're not treating the people in your class as individuals who have unique needs. Right. It's not wrong to correct yourself and fail.
Without a doubt. We're working on a large assessment for both of our programs right now. And we're developing a survey to help people to get an idea of what's happening in terms of learning outcomes for the classes. And what Kate and I have had good conversations about is that the learning outcomes will stay the same, but the goals will shift given the different perspectives that each unique instructor brings to that class. The outcomes will stay, but the goals, you might have different community partners. You might have different assignments and modules. The outcomes will stay the same, but these goals, these are going to be malleable and they're going to change because you're different and you have a new cohort coming in. We have different technologies.
Right. Yes. And I think that's the key thing, is the learning objective is the same. How you get there needs to change as culture changes, as society changes, as the mix of the group changes. You need to be able to adapt. Right.
And getting people together to have an honest conversation every couple of years about what those objectives are, how you're going about to put those outcomes in place, what types of readings you are putting, what types of activities, those types of things are absolutely essential. And we always stress it. I'm like, look, the assessment, I like assessment because it makes us reflect and think about what we're doing. Are we actually doing what we say we're doing? It's not something critical of like, oh, we have to double check to make sure that, we're like, are we doing it? Oh, we're not doing it. Well, what can we do to make sure that we are doing it so that students can get what we're trying to do and why they've signed up for this particular program? So those are the key things of making sure that we are iterative and that we are listening and we are factoring in feedback. Yeah, I'm excited to see what the data says when we get those results. It'll be interesting because we have all the course goals that have been listed because we want to shift them over to outcomes, and then people can then develop their own goals, what they'll say. And we are trying to reiterate to them that it's just, you'll still be able to write your own goals and still be able to, as long as they're connected to the outcomes. It doesn't take that away from you. If anything, it should
Right.
empower you.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. The outcomes are the things that's what you're really trying to teach. Goals are just a method of getting there.
Yeah, they're the aspirational notion by which we're trying to attain. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can change
Yeah.
because you might have different community partners. You might have different projects. You might shift part of what you wanted to do that semester from last semester, giving something that's happening in the world today.
Right.
Fine and
Yeah.
great and timely.
And one of
Yeah.
the key things as teachers is we're trying to teach those humans that we're teaching how they can adapt in the real world when they get out into the world, right?
Totally.
Even if they end up, in academia as professionals in academia, right? There's a shift there, but you need to learn that agility.
Totally.
And that's the number one, it's like of the top
That's hard.
5 criteria in hiring is agility.
Yeah.
Right.
Being able to
Valuable
think.
if you're able to adapt and to adapt to new situations and apply skills, that's like the number one thing.
Yeah.
Hopefully we've given students, and over the past, maybe year, faculty as well, we talked about not so much confidence, but slowly building up that confidence to be able to do that. And to be able to not think, all right, everything is going bad, I guess we just shouldn't do it. It's like, all right, so some things are going bad. What can we do to help and solve these?
Right.
Not very many people are comfortable with ambiguity. And you can see that as being the big fear behind a lot of that.
Yeah, I think, like, I love my protocols. I love my processes, but I also, the confidence I have in how those work gives me the confidence to be agile as well and be in a number of situations where it's been, the past 2 years have produced a number of situations that have not necessarily been positive. And so
Yeah.
being able to say, all right, let's try to find a way to solve some of these. And so a lot of problems that we've solved in admin and in education that we normally would never have had to deal with, I think has informed us going forward to be much more conscious of our students and our faculty and our staff and our institution of what are we really doing here? What is our real goal? And to have honest conversations rather than, oh yeah, just go there and you'll do fine. As opposed to, if you go there, here are the things you can encounter and expect in terms of resources and support. And we hope that you will check them out. And if you can't find them, please come talk to us because we are happy to do that.
What a great way to end the call, too. We are right on time.
Yeah, I was
What
just
great advice to end with.
I was just going to say resources and support is the name of the game, and hence
Yeah.
your book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the follow-up to the book, right? It's all those resources that teachers need to help incorporate this into their plan. Whatever they're teaching, it doesn't matter what you're
Yeah.
teaching. You can be teaching any subject. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in technical writing or in any kind of writing or English. You could be in science, psychology. You could be teaching anything. Advanced basket weaving.
There you
Right.
go.
You can teach anything. It's really about teaching humans and
Yes.
how to do that accessibly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is just always a delight talking to you.
Thank you
I
for
am
staying.
so glad you could spend time with us.
Thank you for having me. This is great. I enjoy
Yeah.
these conversations. I love having them. I have
Me too.
so many committee meetings I have to go to all the time, where we get reports and stuff like that. But I love talking about education and pedagogy and students and stuff. So this is great. This was a joy.
It just gets you, it gets you all fired up.
I am. I'm excited to teach tomorrow. I've got some other ideas.
Woohoo!